Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us today for this episode of Stay Curious with Nick Thomas, the chief communicator and 35-year veteran out there at NASA. Welcome, Nick, to
Thanks,
Stay
Mark.
Curious.
Good to see you as always.
Well, likewise, we're pleased that Nick has wanted to enhance our program a couple times a month. Like you said, we didn't have a doctor's appointment or dentist, and we appreciate his insight, his years out there at the Space Center, is an invaluable source of history, Nick Thomas is, and we're so glad you want to share that with us here on Stay Curious. And today we're going to talk about the Artemis launch, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. Everything's getting ramped up for it. People getting excited, right?
Yes, indeed. If all goes well, we'll have ourselves a launch of the largest rocket ever take off from the face of the Earth, and we're all looking forward to it.
The face of the Earth. I love that colorful thinking there. Gemini 12 landed 56 years ago tomorrow with two of our Gemini astronaut heroes that are both still alive, us two baby boomers. I mean, that was being 15, 16, 14 years old when Gemini was going on was just so exciting.
And it was something when you were a kid, it's like 14 days in a little capsule. Yeah, I could do that.
Right.
You look at it now at our age, it's sort of like, no, don't think so.
Well, my little brother was on the top bunk, and I was on the bottom bunk pretending I was in the cabin there flipping switches around.
Well, two levels, you were ahead of the shuttle then.
That's right, exactly. And Apollo 12 was launched 53 years ago today. Marty Winkle, how are you? Our co-producer who worked on the lunar module number 6 that was launched today, 56 years ago. Does it seem that long ago, Marty?
Really, no, it does not. But it is.
But it is. And we doubled down on President Kennedy's challenge to land a man on the moon before the end of the decade. I love sharing that, Nick, because we did it twice. And if the Russians had done it once, can you imagine the type of world we might be living in today?
You really can't imagine it as you look back and you realize that all of the things that we learned from Apollo, we shared with the world. And that was the basic goal of the entire space program. The opening charter of NASA when it was first formed was not you'll go to the moon, it was not you'll put a man in space. So you will take everything you learn and you will share it with the entire world. And that's just what we did. While others who were flying at that time were somewhat more secretive about what they were doing, we were wide open. And I think that fact that we were so open about what we were doing really kind of captured the imagination of the world in a way the Russian flights never could.
Exactly. Being open, the excitement. TV was a big thing. We often talk, Nick, about you couldn't get instantaneous information if Michael Collins was starting that spacewalk on Gemini 10. But at the bottom of the hour and top of the hour was AM radio. And that was the Twitter of the day, in my opinion.
Do you remember the simulations the network used to do on spacewalks
yes,
and the
right.
mock-ups and the engineers suspended from the wires and so forth?
Yeah.
And on Gemini 9, I think you'd still find this on YouTube. They were doing a EVA sim of Gemini 9, and the hatch fell off the spacecraft. And God bless him, Walter Cronkite said, now we want to remind you that happened in our CBS studios. That did not happen on the actual spacecraft. This is, after all, a simulation. But
we had a wonderful friend we lost last year, Scotty McLeod, made to age 94. He was the test astronaut for Grumman.
Oh, okay.
And Walter Cronkite was talking to Scotty, starting at Gemini 9, the Earth orbit of the lunar module. To
Scotty and Leo Krupp from Leo used to work with Walter, right? Yeah,
Leo Krupp was the Northrop Grumman guy.
Okay. I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
And I mean North American for the command module, I believe in there. But yeah, so we love talking about with Nick. You're going to enjoy a lot of as fresh as you can get at Artemis information from Nick Thomas here. And look at this, Nick, on our green screen's a beautiful rocket sitting there. That is courtesy of Carlton Bailey. Thank you, Carlton.
Thank you, Carlton.
Actually, he's on his belly. The gravel's behind us there on this great shot of you'll see another picture of that as we talk about that. But
Carlton's really going to make something of himself when he finally gets work.
Yeah, he might. He's tried hard at it here for about 4 or 5 decades to be a photographer, and someday he might just get a winning shot. You'll never know out there.
Yes, indeed.
But and Nick, we're going to talk also on the show about at 5 in the morning. Did you hear a couple sonic booms? You're an early riser.
I'm lucky. I do rise early, but I'm also a pretty heavy sleeper, and unfortunately, I did not hear any of that when it happened.
But we're going to talk about a top secret space plane, or at least I'll probably talk about.
You're going to talk about it
because you're going to act like you don't know anything about it.
About what?
So, anyway, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Marty, for doing a great job on Streamlabs. Our executive producer and director of the museum, Karan Conklin, was in here today. We're facing 690 shows coming up this week.
Wow.
Episodes of Stay Curious. So we'll have we're going to do something about that when we hit 700, I'm sure.
Got to have that mission board, put it up on the wall.
Yeah, that's right. Well, here's one of the reasons why we've been doing so many episodes, this beautiful, brilliant piece of artwork by Chris Calley.
Yep.
Hi, Chris. He's used a photograph there by Mark Usiak. Brother Tom's in the studio. Hey, Tom's sitting over there in the corner, enjoying. They both come down from Pennsylvania for the Artemis launch.
Got a chance to meet Tom for the first time today. It's remarkable how many people we both know.
Oh, good. Yeah, in the press site, I'm sure you all do. He's a veteran here since tomorrow, Tom, is the anniversary of the launch of Skylab that you were at many moons ago. So we'll talk about that. We want to thank Delaware North, and who scratches your check out, I believe, out there at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex. They're the caretakers out there of the visitors compound itself. And one thing, they also have financially supported our museum, and we appreciate that. What I like about going out there, Nick, is they always seem to be doing something to pressure wash, paint.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Always something going on out there.
And what you see there in that photograph, Mark, is really our most important. I won't say it's our most important, but it's our first impression, because when people come through the gate, that's the first thing they see. Now, that hardware you see there is actual flight hardware, with the exception of the Mercury Atlas. That is a mock-up.
Oh, really?
But everything
Okay.
else you see out there is actual flight hardware, and you've got to take special care of that. The Atlas Agena you see there, as you'll remember, the Atlas had very thin walls, and they called it the old gas bag.
Right.
And the only way it held its shape was by being pressurized.
Like a balloon.
Like a
concept.
balloon, exactly. So what they've done with that model was they've got plywood ribbing all on the inside of it to maintain its shape. But as you say, there's a lot of maintenance that goes into these things, and Delaware North has been exceptional about taking care of that hardware, keeping it up to scrub. We just finished a major inspection and refurbishment on our external tank and the two solid rocket boosters out by Atlantis. And so, yeah, Delaware North takes very seriously their role as being a repository of American history, and we're very proud of that.
And thank you for all they do out there. This Gateway, the newest addition out there in the background, is phenomenal. I've not done any of the rides yet, but I'm going to take some time off and do the 4 rides they have in their simulations.
I did manage an overflight of Mars, and I'll give you an idea as to how realistic it was. As we flew low over the mountains of Mars, I literally picked my feet up.
Oh, did you?
Because it seemed as though those mountains were that close. So they've got something going on there. It's pretty remarkable.
Now, Nick, that's a real Titan II and
Yes,
a
sir.
Gemini a mock-up?
Now, the spacecraft is a mock-up, but we got that Titan II out at Davis-Monthan. And Daniel Gruenbaum, who at the time was our
South of Tucson.
who took care of all of our artifacts, Daniel went out to Davis-Monthan, and he found out that there were 12 of these things that were bound for the wood chipper. They were going to be destroyed as part of a treaty compliance. And Daniel saw that, and he said, hey, let us have one of those. We'll put it on display. So after a lot of negotiation, they came to an agreement, but still, environmental health and safety held that rocket for the better part of 2 years while they inspected every manifold, every fuel line, every part of that vehicle, because you remember that vehicle was powered by hypergols, molymethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide, and that stuff will dry clean your lungs if it gets loose on you. So they were very careful about making sure that vehicle was safe, but they turned it over to us. I'm very proud to say that I was asked about a recommendation for the serial number on that Titan II, and I said, give it Gemini 3's serial number, because they were the first. Gus and John were the first.
Good.
Yeah.
What was that serial number?
Oh
Remember?
gosh, I have to go back
Kinda-
and read it.
Was
Yeah.
it like 8 numbers or?
Hey, I got pin numbers. I
got
can't
pin-
even remember
yeah,
now.
yeah. What's your password? Oh
Yeah.
God, now I got to go through that again.
Now I got to get my code book out.
Well, Nick, we're going to talk a little bit about what you do for a living out there and have for 3 decades. Here is the stage out there the other day when Marty and I we were enjoying coming out there now as a group.
Yeah.
Anita Truex, our office manager, Connie McDaniel, awesome volunteer here. We like coming out there and supporting this. And there's Nick above his head there at the podium. He introduces the astronaut. I noticed some of them when I was out there to see Jack Lausema. You didn't need any notes to introduce Jack. You've done it a few times.
Yeah.
But they have a beautiful introduction of the whole space program, and then the astronaut of the day, Mark Lee, was there, and there's Mark giving a talk about how easy it was to be anyone can be an astronaut.
Well, Mark tells some wonderful stories, particularly on his EVAs for Hubble and his EVAs where he tested. He was the first to perform an untethered test flight of that safer jet backpack.
Yes.
And it was remarkable because he had helped to develop that backpack, and he said it was like one day he said, "Okay, good work. Now go out and fly it." So he said that's where the rubber met the road. But you'll notice that distinctive slide behind him. That's the slide he uses for Q&A.
Yeah.
And I refer to that as our founder.
Our
That's where it all-
founder.
That's where it all started. And,
yeah, that could be Ham.
Yeah.
There. You enjoy doing the questions with people out there because you never know what to expect. We were talking about that in our little production meeting here. You had a lot of little kids asking a lot of astrophysics. and
We
Kathy
were
Thornton.
with
But
Kate-
that's Mark in the background there
Yep.
as you are taking a question.
And Mark has some wonderful stories that he tells, and he told me before we went out on the last show, he says, "I've got a great answer to the alien question." I said, "Okay, surprise me. Let's see what it is." So sure enough, on that last show, a little boy raises his hand and says, "Have you seen any aliens up there?" And Mark looked him right in the eye and said, "What makes you think that I'm not one?" You know, we've had 135 missions up there. How do you know they haven't replaced all of us and they're
That's
all
right.
aliens that have come back? So
Yeah.
Mark has a lot of fun with that. And as I say, he tells some wonderful stories about his work as an EVA astronaut, both on Hubble and on the safer test flight. He was a payload commander on the first flight of a Japanese Space Lab mission. So he's got some remarkable experience. And the only thing I don't know about Mark is how in the devil, being so big as he is, how he fit into the cockpit of an F-16.
Yeah, he was a big guy. Tom Usiak, would you hand me to your left there on the wall is the lineup on the wall. Left, no, right there is a lineup of all the astronauts coming out there that going to be out there today. Wanted to give a nice shout out to your partner out there, Mark Smith. Does he's
There
been
he is
doing
over the autograph op.
been doing it out there for a while. This is you go after the talk and tell us when those talks are.
Well, see, our first event is Chat with an Astronaut. As I mentioned earlier, that is an additional ticket for that event. That's the first one starts at 10 o'clock. Then at 11 o'clock, we have our first theater show, and that is included in your ticket. And then at 12 noon, we have our autograph opportunity that you see here up at the second floor of the gift shop. And then we repeat the cycle starting at 2 o'clock, and then 3:15, and then 4:15. Same order of events.
Well, during COVID, Nick, they renovated the gift shop, and it certainly is beautiful how they've done it.
They have done
And they have the astronaut's name up there on an LED screen, and it's very well organized. And you get a lot of people. Actually, Marty went out and saw Kathy Thornton talk the other day, and he said there weren't maybe a dozen people in the theater, but there was about 30 people wanting autographs. So.
Yeah. It's funny because the astronauts will notice that occasionally that the line up there will ebb and flow. Sometimes it's long, and then we draw it down. Nobody's there for a while, and then another line comes up. That happens especially over at the 4:15 event over the Atlantis. So it's kind of an ebb and flow thing, but we always have, pardon me, enough time to sign the autographs and maybe answer a question and then do some photographs.
Oh,
So
you
it's
sign
a lot
over
of
at
fun.
Atlantis at 4:15?
Yes, sir.
And
right.
not here?
Yeah, the gift shop at Atlantis at 4:15.
Oh, okay.
And
Because we'll never see that, Marty, unless we tape a show.
And I will give credit for that idea to Bruce Melnick, because when we were doing a single autograph opportunity, there were so many people who couldn't attend because they were going out on the bus tour.
Yeah.
And of course, we also had the long lines. We would go from that table you see there all the way around the corner down the stairs. The line would get that long sometimes. So when Bruce came in, he had the idea of said, hey, let's do two of these things, one at the beginning of the day, one at the end of the day. That way everyone's bound to catch it, and we'll also be able to draw down the lines a lot easier. So that was a great move, and we're really benefiting by that because we get a chance to actually see more people and get more done. So.
Good. Yeah, I talked to Bruce the other day and said several astronauts, and you including, had commented that he's really done a good job this year.
Yeah, we're really happy.
Not that John McBride didn't do a fabulous job.
No, absolutely.
Hell, John was out there almost 20 years, wasn't he?
John was a spearhead for this.
Yeah.
Well, let me.
He back from Europe? You've talked to?
Yeah,
John
he's
McBride
back.
at
The
all?
last trip I'm aware that he took was a trip to Italy, and as far as I know, he's back home now. But old Globetrotter John, you never know where he's going to turn up.
What you pointing out? Oh yeah, there's Carlton.
Is that
There.
Carlton back
There's
there?
Carlton, and at the table is the backside of Marty, Connie, and
Oh, okay.
Anita.
Yep.
They don't let me take pictures of their pretty faces there, but it's really a great situation there,
Yeah,
and
really.
worth the ticket. Shame on you if you don't see an astronaut and spend the, what is it now, $75 for the daily ticket out there. So
Yeah, it's an opportunity that you can't really find anywhere else. Now, Houston does it, I believe, once or twice a week, but we do it every day of the year except the 2 days we would be closed, Thanksgiving and Christmas. But you can come out there, and when we're open, by golly, you're going to meet an astronaut.
That's awesome. I love it. Who's going to be out there if you're planning to take a vacation down here over Thanksgiving weekend or Christmas time? You got the whole schedule there, Nick.
Yes,
Who's coming up?
from the 13th to the 15th, we have Winston Scott. Coming up on the 16th to the 20th, we have Tony Antonelli. And Tony's one of our new guys. Tony was with us earlier this year in January, and he really enjoys doing the show.
One of the later shuttle astronauts, like 127 or something I'm thinking of. But
Jim Riley will be with us on 21 through 26 November. Woody Spring will be back on 27 through 29, and we'll close out the month with Wendy Lawrence.
all right.
Yeah, so we got a good batting order here.
I see Brazilian's only astronaut, Marcus
bet.
Pontus. I met him last time he was here.
Now, one of the things I recently learned about Marcos not too long ago is that he did run for the Congress, and he did win.
Did he win?
He is a
Okay, I was
congressman.
wondering that.
He's
yeah.
part of the Brazilian Congress now. And of course, you'll remember that he started his political life as a cabinet secretary for the previous president, Mr. Bolsonaro. And Marcos was the in charge of science and technology. He
Yeah,
decided,
very big steam guy for
yeah,
sure.
he decided that he was going to have more of a positive impact on the Brazilian program from the Congress. So he ran for Congress. He did win, and we're looking forward to seeing Marcos on December 4th through the 8th.
Good. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Great. And this is posted, of course, on the Visitors Complex website page there. So, but that's what Nick does out there. Gee, anyone else like to follow him and do that out there? But about everybody, I think, listening to today's show. But what doing it a long time, Nick? What's the reward? How do you feel about seeing? I mean, you cannot count probably the number of astronauts you've introduced, the tens of thousands of people who have been in that auditorium over these 3 decades.
One of my guys says that I've met more astronauts than astronauts.
Yeah,
But,
I'll bet you.
the
But is
reward-
there a thread through the whole thing?
I'll tell you what, there is a
Yes.
thread through the whole thing, and that is the privilege, and I mean that underscored privilege, of being able to learn the history from the people who made it. I mean, just imagine if you were able to go back in time, and how would you like to sit down and have dinner with Thomas Jefferson and find out how the founding fathers did what they did.
Right.
And I'm just doing that in a kind of a closer time frame. But when you get a chance to sit down and talk to a guy, for instance, like Mark Lee, who has performed that untethered spacewalk around the orbiter, or you talk to Al Worden, God bless him, who was on Apollo 15 and made the first deep space spacewalk. And when you hear words from people like that, it is life changing. Sam Durant, to give you an example, Sam can tell the story of the first time he looked out the orbiter's window into the payload bay. And by God, to listen to him, you'd think it had just happened yesterday. He keeps that memory so fresh and so alive and so vibrant. And he was able to transmit that, if you will, to the audience. So, who could want a better job than that? I've always said I have more fun out there than anybody else does, including the center director.
Well, you've helped preserve the history of space just by dealing with people like Wally Schirra. There's no Mercury astronauts alive. I haven't counted up, but probably about 4 to 6 Gemini are alive.
Yeah.
And it's just well put, well said, Nick. We that's why we appreciate you being here. These stories need to be told and remembered. And like he said, who wouldn't want to sit down with Thomas Jefferson and break bread? And you with a lot of these astronauts, you really probably don't talk a lot about them being an astronaut. They're human beings that enjoy other things that you're there to help share.
We relax. We talk about all sorts of things, flying and anything under the sun, from the weather to anything else you could imagine. So it's quite a wide-ranging conversation that takes place in that office. But it's funny how memories will be triggered, and an astronaut will remember all of a sudden something that happened on a flight. Said, I'd forgotten all about this, but ...
Yeah, that's what we love on our Stay Curious programs.
There's a new piece of history for you.
Usually every our space workers say, I haven't thought about that in a long time, or I enjoyed thinking about that. Well, something Nick and I enjoyed thinking about is the Gemini symbol there out there at Spaceview Park, Gemini 12, the last of 10 two-man Gemini flights launched in a 2-year period, 1965 and 66. Nick, every 6 weeks as a teenager, 2 of our heroes were going to space doing things that we need to learn to go to the moon.
What a remarkable time, and what a privileged time it was to be growing up in Florida during that time.
And Nick grew up just 40-some miles up the road in Daytona. And tell us about these 2 gentlemen. I know you met them before. Buzz Aldrin actually legally changed his name to Buzz. Is 92 years old, and Jim Lovell is 94 years old. He's the second oldest living astronaut next to his buddy Frank Borman. But many of you know Jim Lovell from the Apollo 13 saga. But he's so much more.
He is, and I had the privilege of spending some time with the guys when they were down here for a Gemini 12 reunion several years ago, and we spent some time before the show talking, and just 2 remarkable men. And like so many of the astronauts, like all the other astronauts I've had the privilege of meeting, these guys wear that mantle very, very lightly, which is to say they don't big deal it. They don't walk around with the Space Hero medal on their chest. They're very much.
Now wait a minute, you're talking about Buzz Aldrin?
No. I'll tell a story later. But
who wore a paisley tuxedo with all the other black and white tuxedos of the Apollo astronauts?
I will tell you that with these astronauts, whether it's Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, or Shuttle, they remind me very much of the World War II generation, the astronauts and the workers out there. Because if you talk to them and you say, boy, I'm really grateful for your work and this, that, and the other, they'll tell you, say, hey, I was just doing my job. And they are like that. They are just remarkable people. I will slip a story in about Buzz that I learned from Wally Schirra. It seemed that Buzz was doing his interview for the astronaut corps, and one of the people on the interview panel was Gus Grissom. So Buzz comes in, and he's got the sport coat on, and he's got the tie, and he's got the symbol for the Society of Experimental Test Pilots on one lapel, and his cufflinks are from his fighter squadron in Korea. And then I think the thing that set Gus off was that Buzz was wearing his Phi Beta Kappa key. And Gus just looked at him. He said, Aldrin, we've already read your resume. Why the hell are you wearing it?
That's good.
Wally Schirra told me that story.
Well, here is a picture of probably Buzz. What's going on here, and why is this kind of a monumental picture of the space age?
This was a milestone in flight training because up till that time, we had so many problems as far as EVA was concerned. You remember Gene Cernan almost totally exhausted himself
Gemini
on
9,
Gemini 9.
yes, very
And then on
risky.
10, Mike Collins had the difficulty in getting from the spacecraft over to the Agena, and we were just flailing away, as it were, in spacewalking. And then the idea came forward that the best way to mimic the effects of zero gravity, or at least as close as we come to it here on the ground, was to submerge the whole training exercise in a pool. So we initiated this with Gemini 12, and we came to the conclusion that one of the things that were sorely needed were handholds and footholds, so the astronaut could anchor himself and get his job done. So all these things were tested out in the pool, and subsequently, when Buzz went out on that spacewalk on Gemini 12, which I think was about 5 hours, the longest one we had done up to that time, he performed like a champ. And that was when we were able to say to ourselves, yeah, EVA can be doable. It is not this dragon in the sky that's going to slay us every time we come up against it. And we went on to prove that, of course, in Apollo. And then we totally refined the art in the shuttle program. I mean, we added so much to the EVA palette during shuttle that it's unbelievable.
It was like a ballet scripted thing, thanks to Story Musgrave, that insisted that.
Story said his exemplar for EVA was Dorothy Hamill, because he said that when Dorothy was doing a triple axel, she wasn't thinking about the gold medal. She wasn't thinking about the post-Olympic party. She was thinking about getting that blade flat square on the ice. And that's what Story calls perfection in the moment. And that was a philosophy he carried into the world of EVA with him.
Story Musgrave, we've saw him in April. He's 86 years old, I think. He's still hard to keep up with.
We wished Story and all of our Marines happy birthday, happy 247th.
Oh, this is Marine Day?
No, not today, just last week.
Oh, last week, yeah.
But I sent out an email to all the Marines wishing them happy birthday, and Story wrote back. And
did he? Marty's a Marine there.
Happy birthday, Semper Fi.
We celebrated the veterans on Friday. On Veterans Day, and we got to celebrate, I guess my favorite Marine outside of Marty would be John Glenn.
Yep.
And that F-86 Sabre jet. You know who John Glenn's wingman was in Korea?
No.
Ted Williams.
Oh, wow, okay.
Ted Williams, one of the greatest baseball players of all time. Took 3 years out of his prime to fly, and he was John Glenn's wingman there. Yeah. So, tomorrow, November 15th, 1966, this was the scene as Gemini 12, a tiny little spaceship of 2 men in it, landed in the Pacific Ocean. And in the program, we had to learn how to have a spacesuit to walk on the moon in, which this one did. We had to rendezvous with 2 spacecraft. They launched an Agena or a target on 4 or 5 of the missions. They had to learn if we could keep a human being alive for 7 days, 3 days to the moon, 3 days back, and a day there. And we did it 14 days with Gemini 7. But Nick, people don't think a lot of little things like, how do you feed these macho test pilots for a week in space? What the hell are they going to eat? Where are we going to store the eliminations of your bowel functions?
All the housekeeping, as it's called.
Yeah, and so there's a lot to this program that doesn't meet the eye.
Back in Gemini, we saw the first of the dehydrated food. During Mercury, we saw the food in the toothpaste tubes. And Gordon Cooper told me about the pureed beef in the toothpaste tube. I said, how was it? He said, you remember kennel ration? I said, yeah, I remember the dog food. And you open up the can, you dump it in, and the smell went around the block before the food hit the can or hit the bowl. And Gordo said, well, that's what it smelled like, and that's what it tasted like. But it got a lot better in Gemini as far as the dehydrated food was concerned. And you had, you didn't have hot water on Gemini. They didn't have hot water until we got to the Apollo program. But you could have a pretty good menu. Those meals that were so tightly compressed because you had to save space and you had to save weight. All the food was stored in the locker just between the 2 seats right here about where your head is. And that's where you got your food. You pulled that locker out and selected your food, and you had the little water gun to rehydrate it with. And it was passable. There was, of course, a story of the corned beef sandwich on Gemini 3.
Right.
But yeah, the food kept you alive. I think that's about as much as you could say for it.
Harrison Schmidt, the last moonwalker, said to me one time that you see that space food in your displays in the museum and so forth like that. He said, you got it because we wouldn't eat it.
Yeah.
If it was space flown, that's how bad it was.
Well,
we didn't want cream beef or something.
We were
like
talking
that.
to one of the guys about when you did your diet, when you selected your menu at the food lab. Invariably, the dietitian said, "Well, you need more vegetables. We got to give you more vegetables. How about Brussels sprouts? How about spinach?" Yeah, okay, put it on. And of course, they put it on, and it would come right back. The guys wouldn't eat it when it was up there. And one of my friends said, "We've got containers of spinach that have made more flights than some astronauts."
That's interesting. Well, we're talking with Nick Thomas here, 35 years, wonderful career out at Kennedy Visitors Complex as a lead communicator out there. Quickly, what's going on in this picture of the last?
Back when I was a little boy during Gemini, half of us wanted to be astronauts and the other half wanted to be the frogman jumping out of the helicopter because that just looks so cool. There you see the spacecraft. The dye marker's been jettisoned. The whip antenna is deployed there for communication with the recovery sources. Even though it's wet, that heat shield is probably still quite hot.
I can see some mist on that heat shield, I think, because they don't have the collar around it.
And that's what the frogman there is going to do, is going to put that collar around that spacecraft before they crack the hatches and get the guys out of there. And back in those days, we would normally, the crew would be winched out of the spacecraft and then brought onto the helicopter and then flown to the deck of the recovery carrier.
Just like they do the SpaceX Crew Dragon.
Well, no, the SpaceX, we don't hoist them up into the helicopter. We keep them in the capsule.
Right,
and
yeah,
pull it back onto the recovery ship. So it's a little more civilized. But then again, these guys have been up. Then they've been up in space for 6 months.
Yeah.
So you want to treat them with kid gloves.
Exactly. Stay tuned for some Artemis update stuff here, but we can't get by a beautiful Artemis shot there. Thank you, Carlton Bailey. But we got to talk about the launch today in 1969. All right. 53 years ago of this crew, what many consider the best crew ever, left to right. Charles Pete Conrad in the center is Dick Gordon, and Mr. Al Bean is on the right. They've all passed on. They all are buried within sight of each other at Arlington Cemetery, and they were all trained together as Navy pilots together. Actually, I think Conrad was their
Pete was
teacher
their instructor for both of them.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about these guys and this mission. Marty was there when he saw the Saturn V launch.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, this was our effort to double down on President Kennedy's goal of putting a man on the moon. We're not only going to do it once, we're going to go back and do it twice and some more times. So Pete and his crew made the first attempt at a pinpoint landing on the moon, because part of their mission objective was to get to the old Surveyor spacecraft that was in a crater on the moon, grab some samples off that early spacecraft and bring it back home with them. Well, they landed well within sight of the Surveyor. But the most exciting part, if you listen to the communications during the landing, they go to, I think, P-63, where the vehicle pitches over and they can actually look through the windows. And Pete, on the left side, had a lunar designator crosshairs on his window. And that crosshair was seated exactly on the center of the crater where the Surveyor was. And Pete was just ecstatic. And he said after the mission, he said, when I looked through that window and I saw the Surveyor crater right in the middle of the bullseye, I realized that this country could do anything.
Wow. Yeah, I've watched that landing more than probably Apollo 11. They were so excited.
Yeah.
He's going, doggone it, it's right there.
My mother loved those guys. She
yeah.
said, they're up there having fun. They're not like those other guys, all quiet and serious, but they have fun.
Well, it started out not so fun when just seconds after the launch, a lightning bolt hit the Saturn V rocket. Yeah. And Werner von Braun credits the most important and smallest stage of the Saturn V for saving the day. And that would be what stage, Nick? You know what I'm talking about?
The IU.
The instrument unit.
Because our nav system on board the spacecraft had crashed. We lost the platform, and it came out of alignment. But luckily that IU kept chugging along, and we did not deviate from course during that whole emergency.
A gentleman named John Aaron become real famous.
Yeah.
for saying, telling them completely black in the spacecraft. You're jammed in there like sardines. The lights go out, alarms are going off all over the place. Your Saturn V rocket is just roared off the pad, and you got to be thinking Hail Mary or Mother Doug.
Well, you listen to that comm, and you'll hear Pete call out all the lights on the board, and he's basically singing what we call the pilot's death song. And you enumerate every light that's lit up, so after the vehicle crashes, the investigators have something they can go on. So that's the pilot's death song.
And as John Aaron said, flip a switch. What's the famous?
SCE to auxiliary.
And Bean knew where it was, right behind him, and flipped it, and everything was like fine.
Signal conditioning equipment to auxiliary. And the important thing that switch throw did was it brought back all the displays in mission control, because that was a circuit through which all that telemetry came through.
How about this shot, Tom Usiak? I wonder who shot that. Or is that for some video film there? But I'm telling you, this guy, Nick Thomas, knows his stuff. Throwing a P63 at you, I know what that is in the desky computer language there, because P64 would be next, and we lost a great guy, that Bob Pearson, that taught all the astronauts how to land on the moon, and then knowing the AUX, auxiliary. AUX means what?
Auxiliary.
I mean
SCE is signal conditioning equipment.
Signal conditioning equipment to auxiliary, and that saved the day. And we love showing that here's the spaceship that went to the moon. This is our spaceship, 2 parts. Okay, now we're going to the moon, to the Lunar Gateway, and then we're going to land on the Starship. That a lot of NASA's talks I've been seeing lately still don't show the Starship at that gateway. They're showing Apollo on steroids there.
Yeah.
But they'll catch up, I think, once that Starship haven't even left Earth yet, all right, to orbit the Earth. So, but there's a spaceship going there. Marty, what was lead there? Is that the way it was going to the moon with the...
going to the moon with what they used to call legs first on a lunar module.
Legs first. So so the moon would be on the left if they were headed to the moon on that. And of course, Marty was a Grumman electrical engineer, worked all over that. You need to go and hear him talk about LEM 9 out there under the Saturn V. We learned so much just standing there with Marty and him starting to talk about stuff because he walked around that very lunar module.
Absolutely.
That's the real deal there. There is the incredible, seminal, famous picture. Unfortunately, when they toted out the color camera, the lens cap fell off. The lens got exposed to the sun and burned out the cathode ray.
TV camera.
Camera.
Now this will be a shot from the Hasselblad. You can see the cross markings on the frame.
The Resu marks, they call it, and up at the top on the crater
you can see
edge is the Saturn
camera that's mounted on their chest, and that's the Hasselblad.
Yep. So we don't want to forget these guys, though it seems like history wants to. It's so hard to get people excited about. Just 6 moon landings happen every year. I think they need to be national holidays.
Unfortunately, we're in a period of time where we're getting further and further into the idea of instant gratification. What have you done for me lately? And you tell some of the kids that, we're going back to the moon. So, we've been there and done that. Well, Al Warden's answer to that question was, you haven't been there and done that. We've been there and done that. Your generation has got to step up to the mark too. Okay. So we think we've got plenty of smart people in this generation coming up, and we're privileged to meet a lot of them over at the visitor center. When you have a 14-year-old girl come up to the autograph table, and the astronaut says, well, what are you going to do with your life? And she says, I haven't decided if I want to go to Purdue or MIT. And she means it.
Wow.
We've got a lot of sharp kids out there, and others get more of the publicity, but there are young people out there very quietly moving down this path toward science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And I think this country's got a bright future. The people that we speak to, the young people we speak to out at the Visitors Complex, they are very excited about Artemis. They're excited about the SLS rocket. And as the astronauts will tell these kids, you guys are the Mars generation. So we've had our time. It's going to be up to you to pick up the torch and press on to Mars.
Well, I agree with you. These STEAM programs, everywhere you go, a lot of kids involved in it. I love seeing the robotics
Yeah.
stuff that they're doing on there. So, yeah. So we hope the future's bright. I keep saying this, Nick, though. I think we'll see a Chinese woman on the moon before we do an American woman on the moon, because they're pretty sneaky, them Chinese. We don't know what they're up
Care to
to.
make it interesting?
Make a bet?
A steak dinner?
Yes.
Steak dinner.
I don't wish that on America.
No, I understand that.
But yeah, I'll take a steak dinner.
You gonna stand up to that?
You bet. Look me up in 2026.
Dun and Bradstreet.
All right, on there, Dun and Bradstreet, where you want to eat, huh? Uh-oh, a Ruth's Chris. I'll have to start saving
Now we're going to
up.
go to New York. They're going to reopen 21 for us.
I've been to 21 many, many years ago, 30 years ago. You remember 21?
Oh yeah, I used to go there all the time when I was up in New York.
Okay, how about Cowboys?
Cowboys, I didn't go there. No.
Okay, yeah.
For me, it was 21 or the Stork Club.
Ooh, wow.
Because the only places I was socially acceptable was 21 and Grand Central Station.
Oyster Bar, Oyster Bar. We're having fun here with Nick Thomas. We're going to talk about something that went boom in the night Sunday morning, and that's the X-37B space plane. And like I said, you get up early in the morning, but you didn't hear this, all right?
I sure didn't.
And this is housed at one of the orbital processing facilities. I think OPF-3 is where it is sitting right now after this spy plane spent over 900 days, folks. That's 2.5 years orbiting the Earth. There it is after it came down. It's kind of small, but it's a shuttle type vehicle that we think looks like this in space, all right, with a solar panel and so forth. But Nick, what do you know about this?
What do I know about what?
About what? The X-37 spy plane out there
That's
that
interesting.
flew into your Kennedy Space Center, landed there at the shuttle runway.
All I'll say is I still work out there,
Uh-huh.
okay, and I want to keep working out there. So I think those are some beautiful pictures you have there, and I think that's about as far as I'm going to go.
Well, this is undoubtedly a wonderful national asset. Something peculiar, Nick, you said when this landed out there, am I thinking Sunday morning or Saturday morning? Saturday at 5 o'clock. They suspended the visitors complex admissions, right?
We suspended operations that day due to operational constraints of NASA.
Okay. So I'm not going to pry and twist Nick here. This is serious business. This plane particularly, this could be really an ace in the hole for our country in the spy versus spy with Russia and China and all. I'm frankly surprised they let these kind of pictures out, frankly,
Yeah.
knowing what an important tight-lipped thing it is. But could we put one or two people in that? I don't know. It looks like it's got a windshield covered up there and so forth. But this is the sixth time that this vehicle has flown. Not this particular vehicle. I believe there's two separate vehicles that have each flown three missions, and they keep pushing the envelope. This lasted in orbit 4 times longer than either this one or its predecessor did. So, but yet, we want you to know that Kennedy Space Center is more than just unmanned satellites and humans going to the space station.
We are an active launch facility across the board, multi-user spaceport, as Bob Cabana used to say. Commercial space flights, human space flights, everything across the board is happening at Kennedy Space Center and over on Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, and it's an exciting time to be there because I think it's just going to get. I think the activity is simply going to ramp up more and more. When I first got there in 1987, we were averaging 12 launches a year, and now we've just supported, I think, our 49th launch this year.
From 12 launches a year to 49. So
Yeah.
if Artemis goes off Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, that's the 50th
It could
launch
be
of the year.
Big 5-0 this year.
I like that. I feel good about it. And I feel good even after we experienced Hurricane Nicole and our good friend Nikki Stott there. Took in good humor, though when we talked to her, she didn't like hearing Nicole associated with the pathos of it. But that's a picture of her in the cupola on the ISS with a shirt that says hope on it. And this was the predicted winds of the event that happened Wednesday night, Thursday morning. And this is actually what happened, something that we pulled off the internet there, Nick. This is the winds that were supposedly experienced at this rocket.
Yeah. Now, as I understand it from the NASA officials describing that, I think it was Jim Free, was saying that all those winds are within tolerance of the vehicle. So we did not exceed tolerance during that storm.
93 miles an hour. Now, the week before or the other hurricane that they pulled it in for, which was named Ian, they were saying 75 miles an hour was the threshold, but obviously they got almost 20 miles over that.
Well, to give you an idea as to what thresholds mean in this business, you will have often heard the call saying the shuttle engines have been throttled back up to 109% of rated thrust.
Yes.
And people will say, well, how can you get more than 100% out of anything? It's because we exceeded the constraint factor by a factor of 9%. We were expanding the envelope, the operational envelope of those engines. And so you've got the same thing here. You've got the posted constraints and allowable wind conditions, but there is a margin built in within that.
Like you said, Associate Administrator Free was the point person on this, and he said at no time, he made it clear at no time during Hurricane Nicole did wind speeds exceed the certification limits of Artemis 1 launch vehicle. So everything is go out there. We wanted to, well, except Nick has we're going to save that, your little update here that you know about today. They did experience 100 miles an hour winds on the Cape center there at these different tower locations there. But our friends Mark Usiak and Carlton Bailey were out there yesterday setting up the remote pictures. Thank you, Mark, for sharing this picture up there. You see some of the other photographers out there that are setting up 2 bus loads, about 60 different photojournalists out there setting up. And there's Mark. Hey, Mark Usiak. He said that they went back out today because winds blew over maybe some of these. And what he's in front of there is a remote camera set up for the sound waves to trigger the going off there. And Carlton Bailey, thank you for getting down on your belly to take this picture of the crawler rocks there in Artemis.
The gopher's eye view.
Yeah, gopher's eye view. That's squirrel eye view, I think he'd prefer. And then all these guys helped him get up. Carlton
Well,
from
it's
up there.
remarkable seeing these pictures of the photographers out there. Every time, speaking for myself, and I think speaking for a lot of those photographers, every time you go out there on an assignment, it just doesn't get old. I mean, you can't see enough of a rocket like that out on the launch pad. And it just simply something that puts some goose pimples in the right place. There's just nothing like seeing a vehicle on the launch pad getting ready for flight, and especially a vehicle as important as this one is. It's going to eventually take us back to the moon and be part of the architecture that will take us on to Mars.
That's right. Well, you and our good friend Hugh Harris, who's going to be with us Friday, the voice of NASA, always say, no two are alike.
No
two launches are alike.
Absolutely right.
So get out there and watch it there. There's a nice close-up of the SLS ESA's service module below the Orion spacecraft that is covered up in a complete shroud there, all right, with the escape tower. And you shared with us this close-up view from, I think, American Space website there. See the gentleman up there in the White Room. So tell us about a concern that you heard before you come over to our studios today, Nick.
Well, the thing they're looking at right now is some RTV, which is room temperature vulcanizing glue. We use that extensively during the space shuttle program, and there is a line of it. If you look above the NASA worm there.
Would you point that out, Marty, the line above the worm there that we were talking about earlier?
That goes around the seam, and that is the seam between the spacecraft and the LAS adapter.
Up higher.
A little higher.
The next line.
Next one up. There it is. And that is the RTV that apparently was, some of it was blown out by the high winds up there. They are discussing, as we're speaking right now, they have discussions undergoing as far as what they're going to do about this particular situation. Aside from that, there was some water intrusion in the White Room, but that was no big deal. That was cleaned up very quickly. And also at the tail service mast at the base of the vehicle, there was an electrical cable on the liquid hydrogen tail service mast that was giving some erratic electrical data. So the idea is to go in there. I think Sunday they went in there to change that out. But the team says that if the new connector has the same fault, that they're not going to be concerned because they have redundant sources of information provided through the cable, and that issue would not hold up launch. So the one thing, I think the long pole in the tent that we're looking at right now is that RTV that came loose and what they want to do about it.
Mm-hmm. Now that's for better, and well, to just make an analogy, it's like a cellophane or something that's over there.
Well, it is almost like a caulk, like a clear caulk, and it's quite thin. And the importance of it is, as I say, it's at that joint, that seal that joins the LAS to the spacecraft.
And it's a thermal barrier.
It's a
we
thermal
were talking
barrier
about because how hot does that get ascent to orbit with the friction of the atmosphere?
Going uphill as you're getting faster and faster, the friction grows and grows. And I think they're going to peak at about between 1,200 and 1,300 degrees on that vehicle as she heads uphill. Now, those were the same numbers that they had for Space Shuttle. And that's why you had the white tiles on the top, because they could withstand up to, I think, over 1,200 degrees. And let me see. Let me remember my numbers here. Yeah, 1,200 degrees heading uphill. And so that RTV is obviously there for a reason, and that's something that they want to look at very closely before they press on. And I expect as I say, I think they're in meetings right now, and we may not hear a decision until sometime earlier, mid-evening, something like that.
Well, we are at 1 o'clock tonight. We're 24 hours away, so we're about 30 hours away from launch. The countdown has started, correct?
Yeah.
This is a 3-day process here.
Exactly.
So the actual countdown started yesterday afternoon, I believe.
Yeah. And the big thing, of course, we're all going to be watching will be the behavior of that liquid hydrogen at the base of the vehicle, where we've had the problems with the leaks. Liquid hydrogen is very slippery stuff. But during the last tanking test, they seemed to be confident that they were able to get around that problem by slow loading that tank. So they built that now into the timeline. That's going to take a little longer to load the cryo into the tank, but they believe that loading it at a slower pace will keep that interface plate properly conditioned in such a way that it will not leak. But the only way we're going to know it is to do it.
It's right to do it out there. So how's the weather prediction?
Weather, as I understand it, looked really good. I think we were on the order of 90% green for launch day. Of course, this is Florida. Stay tuned. You never know what the weather's going to do here. But I think weather is, at this time, not a constraining factor.
And they're looking at 1:04 a.m. It's a 2-hour window.
As my uncle said, at the crack of ice.
Crack of ice. Yeah. So that'll be some fun. August 29th, it was a lot of fun. A circus atmosphere at Spaceview Park. We had 2 German TV stations there, and the locals. And, I think starting tomorrow, things will start getting a little interesting around here.
Absolutely. We'll start picking it up. We'll start seeing the crowds out there at the visitors complex. I have already seen people taking up position on US 1 over in Titusville.
Oh, Dave, yeah.
They staked out their territory, and they're all ready for it. And, of course, back in the old days, back in the Apollo days, that's where I was with my father, just across from the old Sears building.
Were you?
And we're there where that condominium is now, but that's where we watched the launches from.
Good memories here we're sharing with Nick Thomas. So we want to get that bird up. I feel good about it. If not, we're going to send Godzilla out there to... or Fodsy is what Carlton Bailey's mascot there. He's still bemoaning the Braves didn't win this year. That Houston did, but we have a lot of fun out there.
Let it go, Carlton.
Let it go, Carlton is right. But Nick, we're so glad that you take your time to share with us here. Warehouse of Information, another wonderful hour here on Stay Curious about space history. Nick knows I love talking about the Gemini programs and those the Mercury Gemini astronauts that were on my walls in my bedroom there as my heroes there. And again, we celebrate Gemini 12 with Buzz Aldrin, 92 years old, Jim Lovell, 94 years old. The day will come one time when they're not with us, but we hope they're enjoying their memories there. So tomorrow, Marty, we're going to have with us at Stay Curious, Amy Matthews, and that's Titusville Police Chief John Lau. That was for the Crew Dragon launch a couple years ago there when we were doing old school ways of doing things. We've got Streamlab going on today, but looking forward to having Amy and a police officer in here to tell you about the traffic pattern. So if you're coming down, please tune into that show. We're also going to have Chuck Jeffrey here to talk about our Saturday memorabilia auction, where 400 lots of items worth $200,000 or more will be auctioned off, and you can own a space flown item, an astronaut autograph, all kinds of things out there. So appreciate everybody here today. Doug Forrest is watching from Los Angeles. Melissa Pope is here at the Space Coast Office of Tourism. Dave Stengy's up in Michigan. Bandy Darlington, not sure where Bandy's from. Why don't you read off a couple of those for me there?
Okay, on the list we also have Steve Hammer. We have Daniel DeJong.
DeJong, he'll be in town. He's an airline pilot. Come by, Daniel.
William Whiting, Gary Jarrell.
Yeah, Gary Jarrell just got off his tractor, and he's a peanut farmer in South Carolina. And we love Jerry. Thank you for watching, Jerry.
I'm a big customer of yours, Jerry.
Yeah.
We have Umberto Velada, Velada Lopez, I'm sorry. Umberto Velada Lopez, Pamela Shivak, and Tammy McColledge. Is McColledge Mill, is that right?
Yeah,
McColledge Miller.
McColledge Miller.
Okay,
there.
the R kind of ran off the
Pam's
paper.
a solar astronomer friend of mine, a Buckeye from Ohio. So
Good.
We're glad that you all enjoyed Stay Curious today. We know you learned a lot right from one of the sources out there. Except we didn't learn anything about X-37B, but that's all
about
right.
What?
About. But just keep our country safe. That's all we want to do with our wonderful Space Force doing wonderful things that we don't really need to know about. So thank you, Nick, for being here. Marty, I appreciate you.
Thank you, Marty.
And our wonderful staff here at the American Space Museum. So until tomorrow, when we talk about Artemis and you all descending on us here in Titusville tomorrow. Until tomorrow, I'm MarQ Marquette saying we'll see you again to bridge the space between us.